What are decorators in Python? So what is a decorator? A decorator is simply a function that is used to modify the behavior of a defined function. For instance, if we want to modify the function declared like this, you can actually use a decorator. So decorators are much more used in authentication and access control, where one needs to give access to certain pages. Like in a system, certain pages, a system might be an e-commerce website that is admin privileges and a customer privileges. A customer is allowed to access all other pages except the addition of categories, prices, and products. But the admin is open to add those categories and products because he is the admin, or he has got the admin role or admin privileges. And we can also use the decorators in logging, right? Like we want to log a certain message when executing a block of code, you can simply call that decorator. We can also use it to actually see or calculate the running time of a function, right? The time of execution of a certain code or piece of code. So we are going to demonstrate all those three in this video. We start with a logging function, right? So let's remove this piece of code and define our function, and we call it logging function. And it is going to take a function as a parameter here, and we are going to define a wrapper for this function. And this wrapper is going to take the arguments and keyword arguments. This is just in case if you want to pass some arguments, but in this case we are not going to use these args and keyword arguments. What we are going to do is we are simply going to print before the logic, or before the business logic execution here. Excuse me for the typos. And what we are going to do is to call the function exactly with whatever the parameters it has. And here we are going to print after the business logic execution. What we are going to do is to return here. And here we are returning a wrapper. This return means we just finished executing and we don't want to go to the next line. What we want to do is just to skip the rest of the code below. Right? So this is the purpose of this break. If it's in loops, it is what we call a break statement, right? So we are going to move on to declare our function now. We are going to use this as a decorator. So to use this as a decorator, you need to use a sign and the name of that particular function, which is this outer function here. You can see we have put it as a logging function. We are inheriting the behavior of this function into the next function. And what we are going to do is we are going to define another function, and we call it some function here that does whatever it does. What we want to do is to print that we are inside the business logic. As you can see, we are inside the business logic function. So the last thing to do is to call this function. So we can call some function here. And if we execute, we expect to see the logs in our console. So you can see the first thing, it executed what is in this wrapper function, which means whatever written inside this is inherited and become part of this child function. As you can see, we have before the business logic execution, and now we are executing inside this business logic function. This is the next statement executed after executing this. And after that, we executed the last statement in our wrapper function or in our decorator. So this means that the behavior of this function below was modified by the function above. So this is what a decorator does. So we have actually demonstrated how logging works. Okay. Next, I'm going to show you how you can see and implement the time logging. So let me define a new function here and call it time logging And in this, we are going to accept also a function, and we are going to define a wrapper function here that takes keyword arguments, and we can have start time as time.time, and we are going to import this time because we are going to use it in this function or in this demonstration. And what we are going to do is we are going to call the result of the function, the actual function execution, which we want to modify the behavior of. And after that, we are going to, let's say for instance, let's also import the date and time here. Import date, or let's say from date time, import date time, something like this, right? And after start time, we want to print the date time date now. Okay. And after here, what we are going to do, after calling the function, we want to also print the time we completed the execution of the function, right? And what we are going to do is to have the end time here. And we are going to print also the time taken to execute this function here. After that, we are going to return the result in this function. And after returning, we are going to return the wrapper function here. So this is our time logging function, how it looks like. It is going to modify the behavior of a function which we are going to define, and it is going to be executed at this particular time, right? So let's go ahead and define our time test function. We are going to use a decorator of time logging, and what we are going to do is define the function. Let's say time test here, and what we are going to do is print something here. We are inside the business logic function, here. Okay, and after that, you can just go ahead and call this time test function, and we want to execute it. You can see the time is 22:07 and it's still finished at 22:07. You can't actually see what's going on. So what I'm going to do is to throw some sleepy time here. I can say time.sleep inside this function, and we'll give it, let's say 6 seconds, and execute this. You can see we have this first log, and wait for 5 seconds, and we have the rest of our logs, right? So the first time is 09:22 29 seconds, and here we can see 09:22 and 35 seconds, but the time to execute is 6 seconds. So you can actually calculate from 29 to 35, there are 6 seconds there. Okay, so this is how you can implement time logging. Once more, you can simply call a function. So we are calling a child function inside our wrapper function or time logging function or our decorator. But this function, we don't know what it does yet. You can fit any type of a function here that does anything you want. And the times, the codes inside that child function or the function which is going to use this decorator, the time which it is going to take to execute is going to be considered in the time of execution here. So this is all you need to know about time logging in Python, right? The last time I want to talk about these decorator functions is in access control. Let's say you have an e-commerce site where you want the admin only to be able to add categories and products and change the prices of the products in an e-commerce system. And you want the customer to do the rest, like shopping, adding products to cart, etc. So what we are going to do is we are going to define a function that is going to restrict access to only admin. Okay, so let's say def admin only. That is going to take a function as a parameter, and we are also going to define a wrapper here. The wrapper function takes the argument of a row, keyword arguments, and arguments, right? And we are going to test if the row is not an admin. What do you want to do? Simply print access denied, something like this, because someone is not an admin, and return, which means we want to break the execution of our function, or otherwise, if the row passed is an admin, we want to return the actual function with the row and keyword arguments and arguments, right? So this is what we will need to do, and later we want to return the wrapper function here. Okay, spelling of return is misspelled here, and then this decorator is complete now. So we are going to define another function, and this decorator of admin only, and this, let's say, categories, and we want to put a row here. What we are going to do is print inside the category business logic of a system, right? And what we want to do is to break this execution after. So the next thing, we are going to call our category function, and we are going to pass the row of user first, excuse me, and let's execute this. You can actually see that access denied. Why? Because the row passed here is not an admin, but it's a user. So let's go ahead and pass the admin here and execute. You can see that we are inside the category business logic. What it is doing is it is going to restrict the access, which means if you take this in an e-commerce site and put it on top of each and every function that you want a user to have the privilege of an admin, for him to be able to access that particular function or the logic in that function, you can simply do this and put the decorator on top of that function. And you can make this function more advanced, and so that it extracts the user role from the actual database, and it is going to use that role to actually determine the level of access or the privileges of that particular user.